Beneath the romantic boulevards of Paris lies a silent empire that predates the modern world by centuries. While lovers stroll along the river Seine and tourists marvel at the Iron Lady stretching toward the heavens, there is a darkness that festers just 20 meters below their feet. This is not merely a basement or a sewer system, but a sprawling necropolis that houses the mortal remains of more than 6 million human beings. It is a place where the air is thick with the dust of pulverized bone, and the silence is so profound it creates a ringing in the ears of those foolish enough to enter. The darkness here is not just an absence of light, but a living, breathing entity that waits patiently for the candles to flicker and die. The catacombs of Paris represent a grim solution to a sanitary crisis that plagued the city during the late 18th century. The cemeteries of Paris were overflowing with the dead to the point where the soil could no longer contain the decomposing bodies. Heavy rains would wash putrid matter into the streets, and the smell of death hung over the city like a poisonous fog. The walls of cellars next to Les Innocents Cemetery actually collapsed under the sheer weight of the mass graves pushing into them. To save the living, the city officials decided that the dead must be moved into the ancient limestone quarries that had been mined to build the city itself. It was a monumental task that would transform the underground tunnels into a kingdom of death. Night after night, for years on end, wagons draped in black cloth rumbled through the cobblestone streets of Paris, carrying their grim cargo. Priests walked alongside these processions, chanting the office of the dead. As the bones were carted from the overflowing graveyards to the Barrière d'Enfer, which translates literally to the gate of hell, the bones were unceremoniously dumped into the quarry wells, piling up in chaotic heaps before being organized into the macabre walls we see today. Femurs and skulls were stacked with artistic precision, creating patterns in the darkness, while the smaller bones were thrown behind this facade. It was an industrial effort to house the souls of the past. But in doing so, they disturbed the slumber of millions. Among the millions of anonymous skeletons stacked in these cold, damp corridors, there are tales of individuals who entered this labyrinth and never found their way back. The most famous of these lost souls is Philibert Aspairt, a doorkeeper at the Val de Grace Hospital during the time of the French Revolution. It was November in the year 1793 when Philibert decided to venture into the quarries beneath the hospital. Some say he was searching for a secret stash of liqueur hidden in the cellars, while others believe he was looking for treasure rumored to be buried in the limestone depths. Whatever his motivation, Philibert took a single candle and stepped into the abyss, leaving the safety of the surface world behind him. The tunnel system beneath Paris is a disorienting web of galleries and narrow passages that spans hundreds of miles. In the late 18th century, these tunnels were not the reinforced tourist attractions they are today. They were unstable and prone to collapse, and most dangerously, they were unmapped. Philibert Aspairt walked deeper into the earth, his footsteps echoing against the rough-hewn stone walls. The air grew colder, and the familiar sounds of the hospital above faded into a suffocating silence. He likely felt a sense of thrill mixed with unease as the shadows danced wildly around him, casting long, distorted shapes that seemed to reach out from the darkness. He was alone in a world that was never meant for the living. As Philibert pressed on the flame of his candle, began to flicker in the stale subterranean drafts. He turned left, then right, attempting to follow a mental map that was quickly unraveling in the face of the repetitive architecture of the mines. Every corridor looked exactly the same, with jagged limestone ceilings and floors covered in loose rubble. The dust, kicked up by his boots, hung in the air, creating halos around his diminishing light. Panic began to set in as he realized he had lost his sense of direction. He tried to retrace his steps, but the tunnels seemed to have shifting his orientation and leading him further into the belly of the beast. The silence was broken only by his ragged breathing. Hours turned into an eternity as Philibert wandered through the gloom. The wax of his candle dripped onto his trembling hand, stinging his skin, but he barely noticed the pain. His mind was consumed by the growing realization that he might be trapped. The darkness pressed in on him from all sides, a heavy physical weight that seemed to be crushing the air out of his lungs. He began to shout for help, but the limestone walls absorbed his cries, returning only a mockery of an echo. There was no one to hear him. He was miles away from the nearest living soul, separated by layers of rock and earth that muffled his screams into nothingness. Then the inevitable happened. The candle sputtered one last time and died, leaving Philibert in absolute total darkness. It was a darkness so complete that it rendered his eyes useless. He stretched out his hands to feel the cold, rough stone of the walls, his only connection to reality. He began to shuffle forward, blindly hoping to find a draft of fresh air or a glimmer of light. But the catacombs are a cruel maze. Without sight, every step was a gamble. He stumbled over loose rocks and scraped his hands against the sharp walls. The psychological toll of the darkness began to fracture his mind. He started to hear things that could not possibly be there. In the sensory deprivation of the deep underground, the human mind begins to hallucinate to fill the void. Philibert likely heard whispers drifting through the tunnel's voices of the millions of dead who had been disturbed from their rest. He might have seen flashes of phantom light or felt cold fingers brushing against his neck. The rational world of the hospital above was gone, replaced by a primal fear of the unknown. He was an intruder in the domain of the dead, and the domain was exacting its price. He crawled on his hands and knees, his fingernails tearing against the stone praying for salvation that would not come. Days passed in the suffocating blackness. Thirst became a torment greater than the fear. His throat was parched, and his tongue swelled in his mouth. He licked the damp walls in a desperate attempt to find moisture. But the water in the catacombs is often tainted and bitter. Exhaustion took hold of his limbs, making every movement a monumental effort. He curled up in a corner of a forgotten gallery, shivering in the constant chill of the underground. The line between life and death began to blur. He was no longer a man exploring a quarry. He was becoming part of the ossuary itself, a future exhibit in the Museum of Bones. 11 years passed before the fate of Philibert Aspairt was discovered. In the year 1804, a group of quarry workers exploring a remote section of the tunnels stumbled upon a heap of rags and bones. They found his skeleton lying near the exit he had so desperately sought, but missed by only a few hundred feet. Identification keys were found on his belt, the keys to the Val de Grace Hospital, confirming his identity. He had died alone in the dark, terrified and maddened by the isolation. They buried him right where they found him, erecting a tombstone that still stands today in the restricted area of the catacombs, a solemn warning to those who trespass. But the story of Philibert is not the only terror that haunts these tunnels. There are legends of a creature that stalks the lower levels, a shadow that moves independent of any light source. Explorers known as cataphiles, who illegally map and explore the forbidden sections of the mines, often report an overwhelming sensation of being watched. They speak of turning around to see a figure standing at the edge of their flashlight beam, a figure that vanishes the moment they try to focus on it. Some claim it is the ghost of Philibert still searching for the exit, while others believe it is something far older, something that was released when the earth was first cut open. In the early 1990s, a video camera was discovered in the catacombs by a group of explorers. The camera was lying in the mud, abandoned, but intact. When they played the footage back, they watched a man exploring the tunnels alone. At first, the footage was mundane, showing the walls and the bones. But as the video progressed, the man became increasingly agitated. He began to run, his breathing heavy and panicked. He was looking behind him repeatedly, as if he were being chased by something invisible. Finally, he dropped the camera and fled into the darkness, leaving the device recording the empty tunnel until the battery died. The man was never identified, and his body was never found. The layout of the catacombs is designed to confuse. The official tourist route covers only a tiny fraction of the network, roughly 2 kilometers out of nearly 300. The rest is a forbidden zone, a tangle of collapse-prone tunnels and flooded chambers. Entering these restricted areas is illegal and dangerous. Yet the allure of the macabre draws thousands of thrill seekers every year. They squeeze through narrow holes in basements and climb down ventilation shafts to access the silent city. Once inside, they are surrounded by the art of death, walls made of thigh bones arranged in crosses, and hearts leer at them from the shadows. One such group of explorers ventured into the southern section of the network, hoping to find the legendary room known as the Sea Room. They were experienced, equipped with maps and backup lights. As they moved deeper, the air quality deteriorated. The oxygen levels in the deep tunnels can drop dangerously low, causing dizziness and hallucinations. One of the explorers began to complain of whispers. He insisted that he could hear his name being called from a side tunnel. The others dismissed it as acoustics, but the unease settled over the group like a heavy blanket. The temperature seemed to drop drastically, and their breath came out in thick white plumes. They reached a junction where the walls were lined not with limestone, but with skulls cemented together in a gruesome mosaic. The explorer who heard the voices stopped dead in his tracks. He pointed his flashlight down a long, narrow corridor that was not on their map. He claimed he saw a child standing at the far end, facing the wall. The group turned their lights in that direction, but saw nothing but dust and bone. However, the atmosphere had shifted. The playfulness of the exploration vanished, replaced by a primal instinct to flee. They felt like prey in a cage with an unseen predator. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the tunnels behind them. It sounded like a pile of rocks collapsing, sealing off their retreat. Panic erupted. They scrambled back the way they came, their hearts pounding against their ribs. The dust from the collapse choked them, reducing visibility to zero. In the confusion, they became separated. The leader of the group shouted names, but the acoustics of the tunnels distorted his voice, making it sound like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The explorer who had seen the child was gone, vanished into the swirling dust and darkness. The remaining members of the group huddled together, terrified to move. They called out for their missing friend for an hour, but the only response was the dripping of water and the settling of the earth above them. They were forced to make a terrible choice to search for him and risk getting lost themselves, or to try and find the exit before their lights ran out. They chose survival. They marked their path with chalk, but found that previous marks had been rubbed away by unknown hands. It felt as if the catacombs were actively working against them, changing the path to keep them trapped. As they stumbled toward the surface, they passed the famous inscription above a doorway Memoriae Majorum, which means to the memory of our ancestors. It felt like a mockery. The ancestors were not resting in peace. They were restless and angry. The group finally found a ventilation shaft with a rusted ladder leading up to a manhole cover on the street. They climbed out into the cool night air of Paris gasping and covered in white limestone dust. They were safe, but they were one fewer than when they started. They went to the police, but a search of the tunnels revealed nothing. No body, no equipment, no sign of the missing man. The police dismissed it as a tragic accident, assuming the man had fallen into a hidden well or become disoriented and died of exposure. But the survivors knew better. They knew that something had taken him. In the weeks that followed, they were plagued by nightmares. They dreamed of the endless tunnels and the walls of bone. They heard the whispers in the silence of their own homes. The catacombs had not just taken their friend, it had marked them. They carried the weight of the underground with them, a psychological scar that would never heal. The catacombs are a place where time stands still, in the ossuary deep below the streets. The French Revolution is still happening, the monarchy is still falling, and the plague is still raging. The bones do not distinguish between rich and poor, noble and peasant. In death, they are all equal building blocks in a wall of calcium. This equality is terrifying because it strips away identity. When you look at a wall of skulls, you are looking at a crowd of people who once lived, loved, and feared just like you. Now they are just part of the architecture. There is a chamber deep in the restricted zone called the Salle du Château, or the castle room. It contains grotesque rock formations and gargoyles carved by quarry workers centuries ago. It is said that rituals are performed here by secret societies who use the cover of the underground to practice dark arts. Explorers have found remnants of black candles, melted wax in strange sigils, and the remains of small animals. The energy in this room is palpable. It is a heavy, oppressive feeling that makes the skin crawl. It is a place where the barrier between the worlds of the living and the dead is perilously thin. Some believe that the sheer concentration of human remains creates a psychic battery, charging the tunnels with negative energy. Every tragedy, every plague victim, every headless victim of the guillotine contributes to this reservoir of pain. When you enter the catacombs, you are stepping into this energy field. Sensitive individuals often report sudden headaches, nausea, and emotional outbursts for no apparent reason. It is as if the sadness of 6 million souls is pressing down on them, demanding to be felt, demanding to be acknowledged. The acoustic anomalies of the catacombs are well documented. Sound carries in strange ways, traveling through the rock and emerging miles away. This can explain some of the whispers, but not all of them. There are recordings known as EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, captured in the tunnels that defy explanation. Voices speaking in archaic French warning visitors to turn back or pleading for help. These voices do not match the frequency of human speech. They are guttural, disjointed, and sound as if they are coming from beneath the ground itself. One particularly chilling story involves a cataphile named Henry. Henry was a veteran of the tunnels who knew the map by heart. He mocked the ghost stories, calling them fairy tales for tourists. One night, he went down alone to photograph a newly discovered chamber. He never returned. His friends went looking for him and found his flashlight on the ground, still on. Next to it was his camera. The last photo on the roll was not of a chamber. It was a close-up picture of his own face, screaming in terror. His eyes were wide, fixed on something behind the camera lens, something the viewer could not see. Henry was eventually found alive, but his mind was shattered. He was discovered wandering in a daze near a different exit miles from where his camera was found. He could not speak. He had torn his own clothes and scratched his skin raw. To this day, he resides in a psychiatric institution, staring at the wall and whispering about the people in the walls. He claims that the bones spoke to him, that they told him the secrets of the dead, and that those secrets were too heavy for a living mind to bear. The catacombs also house the remains of the victims of the September massacres of 1792. During this brutal event, mobs broke into the prisons of Paris and slaughtered half the prison population. These bodies were thrown into the quarries without ceremony. The violence of their deaths is said to have left a stain on the tunnels. In the sections where these victims lie, the air is always freezing regardless of the season. Lights malfunction and batteries drain instantly. It is a pocket of pure malevolence, a scar on the spiritual landscape of the city. Even the official workers of the catacombs, the modern-day inspection general of quarries, admit that there are places they do not go. They speak of tunnels that have a bad feeling, areas where the rock seems unstable, even though it tests solid. They respect the underground, knowing that they are guests in a hostile environment. They maintain the structural integrity of the pillars that hold up Paris, but they leave the spiritual integrity of the ossuary alone. They do not disturb the bones unless absolutely necessary. The legend of the Green Man is another fixture of catacombs lore. He is said to be a spectral figure who acts as a guardian of the underground. Unlike the malicious shadows, the Green Man is said to guide lost explorers to safety. But his help comes at a price. Those who see him are said to lose their taste for the surface world. They become obsessed with the underground, returning again and again, until they eventually disappear for good, joining the ranks of the missing. It is a seduction of the deep, a siren's song of the void. Imagine the moment when the lights go out. You are deep in the ossuary, surrounded by millions of silent witnesses. The darkness is absolute. You can hear the blood rushing in your ears. Then you hear the sound of bone grinding against stone. It is a subtle sound, at first like rats scurrying, but then it gets louder. It sounds like movement. It sounds like the walls are shifting. You remember the story of Philibert and the man with the camera. You realize that you are not alone. The darkness has eyes, and it has been watching you since you entered. The fear of being buried alive is one of the most primal human phobias. The catacombs embody this fear. The weight of the earth above you is immense. If the roof were to collapse, you would be crushed instantly, or worse, trapped in a pocket of air to suffocate slowly. Every creak of the limestone sends a jolt of adrenaline through your system. You are walking through a grave, a massive communal tomb that spans the entire underside of a metropolis. It is a humbling and terrifying reminder of mortality. During World War II, the French resistance used the tunnel system as a headquarters. They hid from the Nazis in the very bowels of the city, using the complex network to move undetected. But even the Nazis were afraid of the catacombs. They built bunkers in the tunnels, but rarely ventured deep into the unmapped sections. They claimed to hear voices and see shadows. Even the horrors of war could not compete with the ancient dread of the ossuary. The dead do not take sides in human conflicts. They simply wait. There is a specific inscription at the entrance to the ossuary that reads Arit si est, Isa, El Empire de la Mort. Stop, this is the empire of the dead. It is a command, not a suggestion. It marks the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Crossing that threshold is a spiritual trespass. You are entering a sovereign nation of bones, where the laws of physics and time seem to bend. The air is different here. It is heavy with the decay of centuries. Those who emerge from the catacombs are often covered in the white dust of the limestone. They look like ghosts themselves, pale and haggard. The transition back to the surface is jarring. The noise of the traffic, the bright lights, the people talking on phones. It all seems trivial and fake. The reality of the underground feels more permanent, more true. The experience changes your perspective on life. You realize that all the hustle and bustle of the city is just a thin veneer over a massive pit of death. The mystery of the catacombs will never be fully solved. There are too many miles of tunnels, too many collapsed sections, and too many secrets buried in the dark. It is a place that resists mapping and resists understanding. It is a mirror that reflects our own fears back at us. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the catacombs are a haunted place. They are haunted by history, by tragedy, and by the sheer weight of human mortality. As you walk through the streets of Paris tonight, take a moment to look down. Imagine the layers of history beneath your feet. Imagine the hollow sockets of 6 million skulls staring up at the pavement. They are the silent foundation of the City of Lights. They are the ancestors, the victims, the forgotten. They are the catacombs. And while you sleep in your warm bed, they are there in the cold dark waiting. The whispers you hear in the wind might not be the wind at all. The shadow you see out of the corner of your eye might not be a trick of the light. The empire of the dead is vast, and its borders are not as solid as we would like to believe. Sometimes things slip through. Sometimes the darkness rises. So be careful where you step, and never ever let your candle go out. The story of the catacombs is not over. New tunnels are discovered, old ones collapse, and new explorers go missing. The cycle continues. The city of bones is a living thing, constantly evolving, constantly consuming. It is a reminder that we are all just temporary residents on this earth, and that eventually we all return to the dust. The catacombs are waiting for us all. Philibert Aspairt is still there, in spirit, wandering the endless corridors, his candle forever extinguished. He is the patron saint of the lost, the eternal guardian of the foolish. If you ever find yourself in the tunnels and you see a faint light in the distance, do not follow it. It might be Philibert trying to lead you to the exit, or it might be a trap to add your bones to the collection. In the catacombs, the dead do not rest in peace. They wait, they watch, and they whisper. Can you hear them? Listen closely. The silence is not empty. It is full of voices, and they are calling your name. The city of light casts a very long shadow, and in that shadow, the dead are king. Sleep well, and remember the ground beneath you is hollow and full of secrets that are dying to be told.